I This is our first of two English language webinars on Beyond Carbon Benefit Certification that was recently launched by the Architecture for REDD+ Transactions. So we're really glad you can join us. For those that don't know me, my name is Christina Majorkirth, and I am the Managing Director here at ART. So I'm really excited to have the chance to walk you through this new addition to the ART framework and explain how it supports high integrity REDD+ programs beyond just their carbon. We'll also explain how to submit public comments, and we have a special guest that participated in the IPLC committee that co-developed the social cultural module. So we're excited to hear from Basuru a little bit later about that module as well. Before we begin, I just wanted to cover a few logistics. You can submit questions at any time into the question and answer box near the bottom of your webinar pane. As I mentioned, you can put them in at any time, but we'll address all the questions at the end. So please feel free to keep them coming throughout the presentation, but we'll look at all the questions towards the end. As you've seen, this meeting is being recorded. We will record this and post it on the website, which is artred.org, Beyond Carbon Benefits. You can also find the page if you go under the stakeholder engagement section. You can find all the information on Beyond Carbon there as well. So as a little background, for those who may not be familiar with ART, I just wanted to start by sharing that ART is a global voluntary carbon program designed to issue high-quality jurisdictional REDD+ credits. We aim to attract finance at scale while ensuring environmental integrity. ART is governed by an independent board of directors and managed by the ART Secretariat. We support national ambition and climate goals under the Paris Agreement. Our vision is simple but ambitious. We want to build the confidence needed in the integrity of forest emissions reductions and removals so that large-scale investments can flow into efforts to protect and restore forests, and reward those who deliver those results. Okay, so how did we get to the point that we are? ART has our standard trees, which includes the requirements for quantifying the carbon results of jurisdictional REDD+ programs, along with our safeguards requirements. However, everyone knows that forests do a lot more than just sequester carbon. There is an incredible range of other benefits related to climate, biodiversity, and the people who depend on and protect the forests. About 2 years ago, ART began to be approached by stakeholders, expressing the need for a new type of certification. Jurisdictions highlighted all of the different activities that made up their JREDD programs and the many impacts that they had outside of carbon. They wanted a pathway to share this information with both their stakeholders and with the market. Buyers and investors in the market shared that they needed a consistent, transparent set of information about these other attributes in order to be able to appropriately value them, and to make a business case for preferential purchasing or increased prices that better aligned with the true impact of the activities. ART also heard from IPLC organizations that they wanted there to be a market mechanism that more directly reflected their values. So after hearing all of this feedback, ART decided to develop this new optional certification program called the Beyond Carbon Benefit Certification. This certification formally recognizes these vital non-carbon values and provides a pathway for ART participants to report and verify the results of their efforts. Enabling ongoing reporting with financial incentives also promotes continuous improvement and holistic planning and implementation by jurisdictions and their stakeholders. We believe building on an existing program will enable the certification to be launched faster and incentivize financing more quickly than alternative routes. This is especially important given the urgency of the need to protect and restore our forests. So how was Beyond Carbon Benefits developed? The certification was co-developed through a highly collaborative process similar to the process we used to develop trees. We worked with 3 expert committees, one for each of the modules: a biodiversity, forest services, and a social cultural benefits committee. We were honored to have experts co-develop the drafts with us in an extremely iterative process. In a first for the carbon markets, the social cultural committee was led entirely by IPLC organizations and we had an Indigenous representative on the Biodiversity Committee as well. Once the Secretariat had developed drafts with the committee, the ART Board reviewed and provided input prior to approving or sharing the draft for public comment. We are now actively seeking feedback from all stakeholders on this draft. We'll share at the end how to submit your input, and we hope you all will be willing to share your thoughts with us. Once we've received the comments, the ART Board will review them and decide if and how the certification should be revised. We will then publish the final certification along with reporting templates. So now that we've discussed the background, let's jump into what I think you're probably here for, which is what the actual certification includes. So as I mentioned, the certification includes 3 different modules: the social cultural benefits, biodiversity, and forest services modules. They must be implemented together. The certification cannot be used on its own, and it must be combined with reporting under trees. All modules have mandatory indicators that are aligned with clearly defined desired outcomes, and the social cultural module also includes optional indicators to provide flexibility reflective of regional differences. Participants must demonstrate conformance with all of the mandatory indicators to obtain a positive verification for Beyond Carbon benefits. As with trees, we designed the certification to be aligned as closely as possible with relevant UN frameworks. Our goal continues to be to minimize the duplicative efforts while supporting government reporting to the UNFCCC. This certification aligns with major global frameworks, including the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Global Biodiversity Framework. There is an annex at the end of the certification that shows the link between each of our indicators and the UN SDGs and the Global Biodiversity Framework. The Beyond Carbon Benefit certification is open to all ART participants that demonstrate conformance with trees and also wish to certify their REDD+ program's co-benefits. Participants will submit a Beyond Carbon monitoring report to ART either alongside or after submission of a trees monitoring report for the same calendar years. Each Beyond Carbon monitoring report will include information on the results achieved during 1 or more calendar years. If no additional results have been achieved since the last submitted report, the participant shall explicitly state this. It is not required that new results be generated or reported in every monitoring year, provided that the outcomes reported in previous reports remain valid, applicable to the current context, and continue to reflect conditions in the jurisdiction. Verification against the Beyond Carbon Benefit certification will be conducted by accredited ART-approved VBBs. We will be developing the validation and verification requirements, including the qualifications for VBBs once the certification is finalized. Participants must undergo verification for all 3 Beyond Carbon Benefits modules simultaneously. Partial verification of individual modules is not permitted. The ART Secretariat will label any trees credits with the Beyond Carbon Benefits certification label once a positive verification report has been obtained and approved by ART for each vintage year. So let's start talking a little bit more about the modules and what's included in each one. The first one that we'll talk about is the Forest Services module. So this module recognizes the other forest services that forests provide that go beyond carbon sequestration, like regulating water, air, soil, and climate. There are 5 desired outcomes and 10 indicators in this module. The first is looking at water quality indicators. Participants must show how they protect or improve riparian areas and watersheds through forest management and conservation as part of their REDD+ programs. The next desired outcome is soil retention and soil quality. So the first indicator for this outcome requires participants to have maintained or improved forest cover on slopes greater than 12% to prevent erosion and enhance soil retention. The second indicator asks them to provide a summary of how the REDD+ program has either directly through REDD+ planned activities or indirectly through funding or other impacts resulting from the REDD+ program led to programs or activities that promote soil retention. The summary of the programs should include details such as the scope and desired outcomes of the program or activities, implementation status, resources allocated, monitoring results, and other information regarding the programs or activities. If the programs or activities are in development, the participant must describe how they are being developed and the anticipated timelines for design and implementation to be completed. The third outcome is climate regulation. So the first indicator here requires that the health of the forests included in the trees accounting area be maintained or improved. Participants need to describe how the REDD+ program defines a healthy forest and how the health of its forests are monitored and evaluated. This could include, but is not limited to, an evaluation of excuse me, the NDVI, the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, Leaf Area Index, Net Primary Productivity, Habitat Diversity, Pest and Disease Presence, or Biodiversity Presence or hotspots. The second indicator is that the REDD+ program directly or indirectly supports collection of data in areas near forest edges related to or serving as a proxy for human health to maintain or improve conditions. The types of data that could be collected here are not limited to, but could include changes in average local thermal stress indicators, the number of occurrences of temperature extremes sufficient to create unsafe working or living conditions, the loss of agricultural productivity related to temperature or rainfall timing or extremes. The fourth outcome is air quality improvement. The indicators for this outcome include having a fire management and control program and monitoring the frequency and impact of forest fires. The fifth outcome is related to the governance. Strong governance ensures sustainable forest services. Therefore, this outcome requires the participants to have laws, policies, or other legally binding mandates for the management of environmentally vulnerable areas critical to water quality and soil retention, and that the REDD+ program results directly or indirectly in the prioritization of activities and programs that have the greatest potential for impact or change to forest services and human health. All right, moving on to the second module, which looks at biodiversity. So this module has four desired outcomes along with their associated indicators. So the first one, participants must identify what the key biodiversity areas or KBAs are and other areas of global and regional biodiversity significance within their trees accounting area. Participants must define how areas are determined to be important for biodiversity conservation on a national, regional, or global scale. The definitions should consider specific criteria such as sites that have high ecological integrity, sites with significant populations of threatened species of regional and global significance, sites with significant populations of range-restricted or endemic species, sites with threatened ecosystems, sites with range-restricted ecosystems and global scale, ecosystems especially important for species life stages such as feeding, resting, molting, and breeding, sites with important species aggregations, including during migration or spawning, sites predicted to act as climate refuge for species and ecosystems, and areas of importance for ecological connectivity or that are important to complete a conservation network within a landscape or seascape. For the second outcome, participants shall provide a summary of how the REDD+ program, either directly or indirectly, led to ecological restoration or improved management activities. Consistent with the CBD definition, ecological restoration activities include protection of intact forests, as well as restoration of degraded or deforested areas. For the second indicator, participants must provide a summary of activities taken, either directly or indirectly, to establish or protect sites that conserve biodiversity values in the long term. Participants shall provide information on areas covered and connections, including justification that the sites are of sufficient size or ecologically connected to similar sites to achieve this goal. For the third indicator, participants shall provide a summary of the sustainable forest management practices included in or incentivized by the REDD+ program. They must identify how each has been designed to enhance positive impacts on biodiversity and minimize any negative impacts. Finally, for the fourth indicator, participants shall provide a summary describing how their REDD+ activities directly or indirectly led to the identification of threatened species and ecosystems, and worked to promote their protection to prevent their decline and extinction. For outcome 3, which is related to minimizing the risk of harming biodiversity values, REDD+ programs must have activities or programs to prevent the overexploitation of biodiversity resources, have a management plan or program to prevent the use of invasive alien species and minimize the use of any alien species in REDD+ program activities, and have a management plan or program to mitigate the impact of any invasive alien species found in their key biodiversity areas that were defined in the first outcome. Finally, for the fourth outcome, this one again focuses on governance because that is so important to the management and implementation of programs. As I mentioned, effective and inclusive governance is essential, especially when it includes IPLC participation in protecting biodiversity long-term. So under this outcome, participants must demonstrate that the REDD+ program has directly or indirectly resulted in a biodiversity governance mechanism that results in the long-term conservation of the identified key biodiversity areas from the first outcome. They must also demonstrate that the biodiversity governance mechanism is designed, implemented, and monitored in a participatory process inclusive of Indigenous peoples and local communities. So this brings us to our third module, the social cultural module. As I mentioned earlier, this module was co-designed by a committee comprised of IPLC organizations. Today, one of their representatives is here with us, and we would like to invite him to say a few words about how the module was developed and the reasons behind including the 5 themes that make it up. So our special guest is Basur Isa. He is currently the Regional Secretary General of Ripilliac, the network of Indigenous and local populations for the sustainable management of forest ecosystems in Central Africa. And we are honored to have him in our webinar today. So I will turn it over to you, Basir. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much, Christy. Good morning, good afternoon to all, depending on your time zone. It is an honor for me to speak today on behalf of the Social and Cultural Committee, which has contributed to the development of one of the key models of art beyond carbon certification, the social cultural benefit model. This model was developed through a participatory and inclusive process deeply rooted in the voices, perspectives, and priorities of Indigenous peoples and local communities. The committee that led this work was made up of representatives from regional organizations, including Ripilliac, which is the network of Indigenous peoples and local community for the sustainable management of forest ecosystem in Central Africa, that is based in Africa. We have COIABI, which is the coordination of Indigenous organizations in Brazil, Amazon. We also have ANEFAP, which is the National Association of Executors of the Administration Contractor of Peru. And we have REDMOCAF, which is the Mexican network of peasant forestry organizations. These organizations have decades of experience working directly with communities in tropical forest regions. Their participation has been essential in ensuring that this certification framework reflects real social and cultural priorities, not just theoretical indicators. Together, we have defined 5 key components or expected outcomes that reflect the kinds of social and cultural benefits that REDD+ programs should generate when they respect rights and guarantees. And they include 1, sustainable community and indigenous economies, ensuring that climate actions generate sustainable, equitable, and culturally appropriate livelihood. Enabling conditions and capacity building, that is supporting communities in building their capacity and leadership that they can effectively participate in and benefit from the climate finance. Territorial rights, securing legal and customary rights to land and territories, and essential conditions for any form of real and sustainable benefit. Ancestral knowledge and cultural identity, that is recognize, protect, and revitalize indigenous and local knowledge systems, language, and cultural practices. And finally, territorial governance, strengthening inclusive community-based governance on forests and territories. These 5 dimensions were collectively identified by the committee as essential for assessing the success of REDD actions beyond carbon. This model is not only innovative in its content, it also represents a new way of doing things. It ensures that indigenous peoples and local communities define the indicators, guide the process, and shape the vision from the outset. This is how we move from theoretical participation to real participation. As I earlier said, it is always an honor and a pleasure to take part in this wonderful discussion and initiative led by ART. Thank you so much for your listening. Over to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Basuru. And I would state that the honor was actually ours. It was amazing to have all of you willing to think through these with us and help us define what this module should include. So thank you so much for all your time and expertise and for being willing to join us this morning. So with that wonderful introduction, we'll now dive into what the particulars of the indicators are. So for the first outcome, the Sustainable Indigenous and Community Economy, as I said, there's a set of mandatory and optional indicators for each of the social cultural outcomes. Obviously, the mandatory ones, all participants must do, and then they must do at least one of the optional indicators in each of the sections. They're welcome to do more if they wish, but they must do at least one. So there are 3 mandatory indicators in this first outcome. The first is that IPLCs have directly received or will receive, according to the agreements reached between the participant and the IPLCs, funds, carbon credits, and or other non-monetary benefits from the REDD+ program's benefit sharing. Examples of non-monetary benefits could include investment in community infrastructure, such as water, drainage, wastewater treatment, education, roads, protection of sacred or spiritually valuable sites, health benefits, or other similar benefits. The second indicator is that the REDD+ program contributes to establishing and operating mechanisms agreed with the IPLCs for channeling funds that are accessible, culturally appropriate, and without excessive requirements for the communities. The third indicator is that the REDD+ program contributes to financing the actions planned, prioritized, and decided in the territorial management instruments. This could include things like life plans, strategic plans, or territorial management plans of the IPLCs, and that the process ensured effective participation of community members, including women and youth. This outcome also has 2 optional indicators for the participants to select from. The first is around strengthening IPLC enterprises, and the second is about supporting the economic empowerment of women and youth in the communities. For the second outcome, there are 2 mandatory indicators. The first one requires that the REDD+ program has either directly or indirectly contributed to strengthening the knowledge and capacities of IPLC and their representative institutions. The second indicator is that the REDD+ program has either directly or indirectly generated or strengthened the necessary enabling conditions for the participation and influence of IPLCs and their representative institutions in public decisions and policies, including the enabling conditions for participation of women and youth from IPLC. There are 4 optional indicators for this outcome. Again, participants must report on at least one of these. So the first is that the REDD+ program has either directly or indirectly developed administrative, financial, and resource management capacities in IPLCs and their representative institutions. The second is that the REDD+ program has either directly or indirectly strengthened capacities and opportunities for the development of financial sustainability mechanisms or strategies of IPLCs beyond carbon market revenues. So for example, community enterprises, endowments, specialized service provision strategies by IPLC institutions, or similar events. The third is that IPLCs directly manage funds for the preparation, implementation, and evaluation of the JRED activities. And the last one is that the RED Plus program provides concrete means for IPLC to participate in monitoring and evaluating the activities of the JRED components, activities, or results. The third outcome around territorial rates includes 4 mandatory indicators. So the first indicator requires that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly contributed to consolidating the legal recognition of IPLC land ownership rights. The second indicator is that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly contributed to reducing existing barriers like legal, regulatory, cultural, or economic barriers to progress towards greater gender equity and access to land and natural resources, and to strengthening women's ownership, use, and/or access rights to land and natural resources. The third is that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly contributed to the jurisdiction developing or strengthening a legal framework and/or official policies that avoid retrogression and recognizes the rights of IPLCs to the ownership of or benefits from the carbon dioxide emissions reductions and removals associated with their lands or activities. The fourth is that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly strengthened the regulatory framework and/or its implementation to guarantee the right of IPLCs to the sustainable management and use of the forests in their territories. Again, there are 4 optional indicators of which the participants must report on at least one. So in brief, these include how RED Plus programs generate regulatory frameworks or policies that recognize the right of the IPLCs to the ecosystem services provided by their territories, respect, preserve, and maintain the knowledge, innovations, and practices of IPLCs relevant to biological diversity, protect IPLC knowledge and genetic resources, and prevent harmful external activities. For the fourth outcome, there are 3 mandatory indicators. The first requires that the RED Plus program has incorporated the knowledge and wisdom of Indigenous peoples and local communities about biodiversity, such as genes, species, and ecosystems, as well as about the use, management, and conservation of biodiversity. The second is that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly strengthened biodiversity and sustainable ancestral or traditional land use systems, such as agricultural systems, agroforestry, forestry systems, etc., of the Indigenous peoples and local communities. The last one is that the NDC compliance report of the participating country or the country of the participating jurisdiction, if it's a subnational government, recognizes and makes visible the contributions of IPLCs, including their ancestral practices and uses to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So for example, by specifying by IPLC group the different cultural practices that led to emissions reductions and/or adaptation. For the 4 optional indicators associated with this, they include having measures in the RED Plus programs to protect cultural identity and the knowledge systems of IPLCs, to facilitate cultural transmission between generations, to protect sacred sites, and to protect uncontacted peoples. The 5th outcome has 3 mandatory indicators. So the first one, the RED Plus program, again, has either directly or indirectly contributed to generating strategic agreements for territorial governance, including on territorial policies, joint actions, destination and use of RED Plus or other resources in the territory, social investments, co-management of natural protected areas, protection of sites and natural resources, etc. These agreements should be between IPLCs, governments, and other stakeholders through effective participation processes. The next one is that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly contributed to the implementation of measures to facilitate and increase the participation of women and youth in decision-making spaces related to forests and territories at the community, local, and national level. The last is that the RED Plus program has either directly or indirectly contributed to strengthening and creating platforms for dialogue and territorial governance between IPLCs and governments. There are 5 optional indicators for this outcome as well. Again, participants must report on at least one of these and could report on more than one if they choose. So these focus on how the REDD+ program strengthens organizational capacities and the governance structures of the IPLCs, how it supports the development of IPLC internal bodies for the implementation of sustainable actions, how the REDD+ program strengthens internal transparency and accountability by the IPLCs and their representative institutions, how the program protects environmental defenders, and how the program leads to the implementation of the schemes that the IPLCs have previously built related to REDD+. So this concludes the overview of the indicators. As you probably guessed, I gave a really brief summary of most of them, so I do very much encourage you to read the full document, as I only briefly touched on all of the different topics today. We really do want all stakeholders to review the certification and provide their feedback. It is important to us, and we do want to have this certification be as strong as possible. So please, please, please take the time to send us your thoughts. The website is on the slide, and you can also find it if you just go to the ART website at artred.org. The certification draft is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. Following the conclusion of all of our webinars, we will post the recordings in all the languages as well next to that certification so that you can refer back to this, or if someone wasn't able to attend, they can still watch the webinar. We will accept comments in any language through the REDD mailbox until August 11th. In order to submit the comments, we just ask that you send them to our general ART mailbox at red@winrock.org, and to include in the subject line that these are comments for the Beyond Carbon Benefit certification. It is most helpful if you also include the section number or title and requirement that you are referencing when you submit the comment, so that we know exactly which one you're looking at when you provide that feedback. I think just in general, a huge thank you again for joining us. I know people are in time zones all over the world, so thank you for making time out of your day to come learn about our Beyond Carbon Benefit certification. We are going to pause the recording in just a moment, and then we'll start taking some of the Q&A that has come in. It's not too late to still submit a question if you have one, though. And certainly if you think of a question after today, please feel free to reach out to any one of us directly, or most easily through the REDD mailbox, because then the whole team will see it and we can respond to you most promptly. So thank you again for your time.